Life in Iceland, beautiful women, and the world's strangest country.
This tiny Nordic island has some of the world's most beautiful women and the strangest laws you've ever heard. But hold on, because that's just scratching the ice. Iceland might look like a frozen land of volcanoes and silence, but underneath, it's weird, wild, and unbelievably fascinating. Think about it. Where else can you go to find baby name laws that actually get rejected by the government? People who believe in elves seriously enough to delay construction. And food that smells like it's been buried with a dead body? But what makes this place truly strange isn't just the folklore or the fishy cuisine. It is the fact that this icy island is also one of the most advanced countries in the world. In fact, it's consistently ranked among the happiest and safest places to live. They have nearly zero crime, a 99% renewable energy system, and a population that seems too good-looking to be real. And yet, they live with exploding volcanoes in their backyard and go months without sunlight. How does that make sense? Here's where it gets interesting. Iceland is the kind of place that's small enough for everyone to know everyone, literally. You can just walk into a bar and flirt with someone without checking if you're related. That's not a joke. There's an actual app where people check if they're distant cousins before dating. And trust me, you need it. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let us rewind for a second and answer a question you might be wondering already. Why is Iceland even on the map for being this strange and this beautiful all at once? And how is it possible that a country with just around 370,000 people could make such a massive impression on the world? The short answer? Iceland doesn't try to be like anyone else. They've created their own rules, literally. Want to name your baby something unapproved? Too bad. The Icelandic naming committee might shut that down. Want a burger from McDonald's? Nope. All of them shut down years ago and never came back. Want to escape the world and live in peace with gorgeous landscapes, hot springs, and people who read more books than anyone else? Then you're probably thinking of Iceland already, even if you didn't know it yet. And the women? Yes, Icelandic women are known worldwide for being not only strikingly beautiful, but fiercely independent. Well-educated and empowered, Iceland isn't just a pretty place with pretty people. It's a country where women's rights are front and center. Where else do women lead protests, get elected to the highest positions, and still manage to top beauty polls? It's not just looks, it's confidence, culture, and centuries of Viking roots wrapped up in a cold, bold package. In this video, you're going to hear stories that sound made up, but they're all true. Like how people bake bread in the ground using volcano heat, or how students sometimes take exams in the middle of snowstorms, or how Icelanders have a Christmas tradition involving not one, but 13 mischievous troll brothers called the Yule Lads, who sneak into homes and cause chaos each night before Christmas. And we'll also talk about dating in Iceland, why alcohol is shockingly expensive, how they live without McDonald's but love hot dogs more than you'd expect. And yes, that disgusting rotten shark dish you've probably heard about but never dared to smell. There's so much to this country that seems odd on the surface, but when you look closer, it all fits together in a way that just works. Iceland is the kind of place that doesn't care about being normal, and that's exactly what makes it so fascinating. So here's the real question. Why do the people of Iceland seem so happy, so free, and so content in a place where the sun disappears for months? The wind tries to knock you over, and your surname literally tells people who your father is. Stick around, because we're going to break it all down. From the beautiful to the bizarre, from the strange to the stunning. Iceland is one of the few places on Earth that can surprise you at every turn and make you question everything you thought you knew about what a country should be like. And by the time we get to the end, you might just find yourself asking the same thing thousands of travelers do each year. Could I live here? Because Iceland doesn't just challenge the cold. It challenges your whole idea of what life can look like when you let go of what is normal and decide to make your own rules instead. Welcome to Iceland, Geography and Cultural Snapshot. Iceland is one of those places that almost doesn't feel real. If you didn't know better, you might think it was a movie set or some untouched planet at the edge of the galaxy. but it's right there, floating quietly between Greenland and mainland Europe, just south of the Arctic Circle. Despite its cold name, Iceland isn't all ice, but it is full of surprises. Let's start with the basics. Iceland is a small island country, covering an area about the size of the U.S. state of Kentucky. But don't let its size fool you. What it lacks in space, it more than makes up for in character. It has got around 370,000 people, about the same as a mid-sized city, yet it has a cultural identity that feels larger than life. And geographically, this is where things get interesting. Iceland sits right on top of two massive tectonic plates, the North American and Eurasian plates, which means the land is always shifting and bubbling. This constant activity has shaped the country into something that looks nothing like the rest of the world. You'll find black sand beaches that stretch for miles, carved out by ancient lava flows. Geysers shoot hot water into the air like steam-powered fountains. And every now and then, you'll hear about a volcano that decides to wake up and remind everyone that Iceland is very much alive underneath. There are over 130 volcanoes across the country. Some are sleeping, others are still grumpy. In fact, the famous Eyjafjallajökull eruption in 2010, yes. Try saying that out loud, caused major flight disruptions across Europe. That was just one eruption. Iceland has lived with this fiery landscape for centuries. But instead of fighting it, the people here have learned to use it. Homes are heated using geothermal energy. There's hot water straight from the ground. And even some bakeries use the earth as heat to make a traditional sweet rye bread by burying it in the soil for a day. Now let's talk about the scenery. Iceland is raw. It's open. It feels untouched. There are barely any forests. Only about 2% of the land is covered with trees. It's mostly wide open spaces, mountains, glaciers, and moss-covered lava fields. And during winter, everything turns white. Then, when the sky clears, something magical happens. The northern lights appear. The sky glows with green and purple waves of light, and it's something you can never really explain until you see it for yourself. But Iceland isn't just beautiful, it's also safe. In fact, it's one of the safest countries in the world. Crime is almost non-existent. Most people don't lock their doors, and the police don't even carry guns. It's that peaceful. You could leave your phone at a coffee shop and come back an hour later to find it exactly where you left it. That's the kind of trust Icelanders have in each other. And there's something else that might surprise you, even though it looks remote and wild. Iceland is actually very modern. Internet speed is excellent. The capital city, Reykjavík, is full of cool cafes, colorful houses, street art, and music. You'll find advanced healthcare, great education, and more bookshops per person than just about anywhere else on the planet. Yet despite all that, there's still this sense of isolation. The roads are long and empty. Sometimes you'll drive for hours and not see another car. Some towns have just a few dozen people, and yet they don't seem to mind. In fact, many Icelanders love this peaceful, quiet life surrounded by nature. It's this balance that makes Iceland feel so unusual. It's cold, yet full of warmth. It's volcanic, but calming. It's ancient, but forward-thinking. And once you're here, you start to feel it too. The stillness, the space, the strange comfort of a place that lets you slow down. So if you've ever wanted to feel like you've stepped off the map, into a place that plays by its own rules, Iceland might just be it. The ground beneath you might rumble from time to time, the weather might change in minutes. But there's something deeply grounding about being here. Something honest, something unforgettable. And we've only just begun. Beautiful people. The Icelandic gene pool, so let us talk about something that gets a lot of attention when people hear the word Iceland, the people themselves. More specifically, yes, the women. There's a reason people search online for why are Icelandic women so beautiful. And honestly, once you've been there, it makes perfect sense. Now, before we go any further, this isn't about judging people by their looks. Beauty comes in all shapes and forms, and every culture has something special. But there's no denying that Icelanders, both men and women, tend to turn heads. They often have clear skin, sharp features, and that kind of effortless, natural beauty you think only existed in movies or photo filters. But here, it's real. And the reason isn't just good luck or clean air, though that definitely helps. Iceland's population has a very unique genetic story. For hundreds of years, they were isolated. This is a remote island, after all. So the gene pool stayed relatively pure, shaped mostly by Norse and Celtic settlers who arrived over 1,000 years ago. Unlike other countries that went through waves of migration and mixing, Iceland didn't. That isolation helped preserve certain physical traits, like fair skin, light eyes, and strong bone structure. But it also helped scientists learn a lot about human genetics. Here is the cool part. Iceland is home to one of the most advanced genetic databases in the world. It's called the Code Genetics, and it's helped researchers study everything from disease patterns to ancestry. And Icelanders have been surprisingly open about it. Many people have voluntarily given their DNA for research, helping the world understand more about how genetics work. That alone makes this little country kind of a big deal in science circles. But back to the beauty part. Yes, Icelanders are often considered attractive, but what really sets them apart is something else: their health and confidence. Iceland has excellent healthcare, a strong culture of outdoor activity, and a diet that's rich in fresh fish and low in processed junk. That plays a big role in how people look and feel. And because Iceland has a strong education system, low levels of inequality, and a lot of social freedom, people grow up feeling confident in themselves. That kind of self-assurance shows. It's not just about looks, it's about how people carry themselves. You'll also notice that there's not much pressure around heavy makeup or cosmetic surgery. A lot of women keep it natural. They don't try too hard to impress, and maybe that is what makes them even more impressive. Now here's a fun twist in the Icelandic story: the dating scene. Because the country is so small, and most people are at least distantly related, there is actually a smartphone app that lets you check whether the person you're interested in might be your cousin. No joke. It's called Icelandic, and yes, people do use it. The app pulls from a huge genealogical database, and if you both tap your phones together and it buzzes, it means, yeah, you're related. That could be a buzzkill or a lifesaver, depending on how you look at it. This tight-knit population means people are careful, respectful, and surprisingly open about relationships. There's a low tolerance for toxic behavior, and a high value placed on equality and honesty. In fact, Iceland consistently ranks at the very top of the Gender Equality Index. That means women don't just look strong, they are strong. They lead companies, run for office, and have their voices heard in every part of society. And the beauty isn't just external. Iceland has an incredibly creative spirit. You'll find women who are musicians, painters, writers, athletes, entrepreneurs, all proud of their roots and their culture. Iceland might not be the most populated country in the world, but when it comes to talent and beauty, it definitely punches above its weight. So yes, the stereotypes about beautiful Icelandic women are everywhere, but the truth is far more interesting. It's not just about how they look, it's about a lifestyle that promotes health, equality, and self-confidence. It's about a community that supports each other, values independence, and stays connected, sometimes a little too connected. Which brings us back to that app again. Whether you visit Iceland for the landscapes, the northern lights, or just to experience something totally different, meeting the people will probably be the thing you remember most. And once you talk to a few locals, you'll realize quickly, this country may be cold, but the people, they're warm, welcoming, and one of a kind. Icelandic dating culture and gender equality. If you think dating in your country is complicated, Iceland might just make your head spin in a good way. It's different here. In fact, Iceland might be one of the most refreshingly honest and balanced places when it comes to relationships, dating, and equality between men and women. Let's start with one simple truth. Women in Iceland don't wait around. If a woman is interested, she'll ask you out, and no one thinks twice about it. It's not considered bold or aggressive. It's normal. Icelandic women grow up in a society where gender roles aren't glued to tradition. This means girls are taught from an early age that they can speak up, take the lead, and be just as independent as anyone else. And here is the thing. It has not just a social trend or a city vibe. It's baked into the country's laws, politics, and workplace culture. Iceland has been ranked #1 in the world for gender equality by the World Economic Forum for more than a decade straight. And that is not just a trophy sitting on a shelf. It shows up in everyday life. Women here have been presidents. They've been prime ministers. They lead businesses. They raise families. And they don't have to choose one over the other. The government even requires companies to prove they rate paying women and men equally, or they get fined. That's how seriously equality is taken. Now back to dating. It's casual, open, and built on mutual respect. There's not a lot of pressure to impress with big gestures or grand romantic displays. People are more relaxed. Going for a walk, grabbing a beer, or sitting in a geothermal pool together is often how things begin. And while Icelanders might seem a bit reserved at first, once you get to know them, they're warm, witty, and incredibly honest. There's not much room for playing games. If someone's into you, they'll tell you. If they're not, they'll tell you that, too. Straightforward, right? But here's where it gets really interesting. The family structure in Iceland is also unique. For one, marriage isn't a big deal here. A lot of couples stay together for years, raise children, buy homes, and live as families without ever getting married. And no one sees that as odd. It's just a personal choice. What matters more is the relationship itself, not the label on it. Fathers also play a huge role in family life. Iceland is one of the most generous parental leave policies in the world, and yes, that includes paternity leave. New dads are encouraged and expected to stay home with their babies. It is not just for bonding. It is a statement. Caregiving isn't just a mother's job. It's a shared responsibility. And that mindset starts early, in schools and in the home. In fact, it is so normal for women to lead that there is a common saying in Iceland, men are the flowers of the world. It's a tongue-in-cheek way of flipping the old script. In Iceland, strong women are celebrated, not silenced. They protest when needed. They speak up. One of the most powerful moments in recent history was in 1975, when 90% of Icelandic women went on strike, refusing to work, cook, or care for children for one whole day. It shook the entire country and pushed major changes in gender policy. That's the kind of power they hold. So if you're used to dating cultures where things move slowly or are full of mind games, Iceland may feel like a breath of fresh or freezing air. People are direct. They value honesty, freedom, and personal space. Relationships are equal partnerships, not power struggles. It's not perfect. Of course, no place is. But Iceland has built something rare, a society where equality isn't a debate. It's a way of life. And when that kind of mindset shapes dating and relationships, it creates something unique. It creates a culture where both people can be strong, soft, open, and real. So if you ever find yourself in a small Reykjavík coffee shop and someone strikes up a conversation, don't be surprised if it's a woman asking you out. That's just how Iceland rolls. And if you're lucky, she might also give you life advice, recommend a good book, and tell you how to survive your first fermented shark experience. Education, intelligence, and language. If there's one thing Icelanders take just as seriously as their nature and independence, it's their minds. You might not expect it from a country with a population smaller than most global cities. But Iceland is one of the smartest, most educated places on the planet. Let us start with something surprising. Icelanders read more books per person than almost anyone else in the world. It's not just a fun fact, it's a way of life. Books are everywhere in Iceland. There's even a tradition called Jólabókaflóð, or the Christmas book flood, where people give each other books on Christmas Eve and then spend the night reading. Yes, instead of getting glued to screens or phones, they cuddle up with a book and hot chocolate. It's wholesome, it's simple, and honestly, it sounds like something the rest of the world could learn from. And it's not just books. Education is strong across the board. Literacy rates are nearly 100%. Kids are encouraged to read, write, and think critically from an early age. Schools here don't just focus on facts, they teach independence, creativity, and curiosity. Even subjects like environmental science and Norse mythology are part of the curriculum. That's right. Kids grow up learning about their country's deep Viking roots alongside modern science and sustainability. The government provides free education all the way through university, which means most people can access higher education without massive student debt hanging over their heads. That alone puts Iceland ahead of a lot of richer, more crowded nations. And because of this accessibility, over 90% of Icelanders finish upper secondary education, and many go on to earn university degrees. Another thing that makes Iceland stand out is how naturally bilingual its people are. Icelandic is the national language, and yes, it's as hard to pronounce as it looks. It's one of the oldest languages still spoken in almost its original form, going all the way back to the Viking Age. But despite how ancient and complex Icelandic is, most people here speak perfect English too. In fact, children learn English from a very young age through school, media, and daily life. Some also learn Danish or other European languages. So you might walk through Reykjavík, see signs and books in a language that looks like a keyboard jammed itself. But the moment you ask for directions or order a coffee, you'll get a smooth, clear reply in English. No problem at all. But language in Iceland isn't just about communication, it's about preservation. Icelanders are deeply protective of their language. They even create new Icelandic words instead of borrowing foreign ones. For example, instead of using the word computer, they use telva, which is a made-up Icelandic word, combining parts that mean number profit. That's right, they made their own word for computer. That's how serious they are about keeping their language pure. This strong focus on language, learning, and history has shaped Iceland into a country that values intellect and storytelling just as much as survival and strength. Maybe it is the long winters or the endless summer days, but people here know how to think, create, and share ideas. It's no surprise that Iceland produces so many artists, writers, musicians, and filmmakers. People are encouraged to express themselves from an early age, and that creativity continues into adulthood. So, yes, Iceland may be a small country surrounded by icy seas and lava fields, but inside its cozy schools and libraries, something powerful is happening. Minds are growing, stories are being told, and a strong culture of curiosity and learning is passed down from one generation to the next. And honestly, when you spend enough time here, it rubs off on you. You start reading more, you think a little deeper, and maybe, just maybe, you begin to understand why this small, cold island somehow feels so full of life. Iceland's strangest foods. In the Rotten Shark Tale, let's talk about food. Iceland's food isn't what most people expect. If you come here thinking you'll be eating the usual pizza, burgers, or fried chicken, well, you'll probably be a little surprised. Iceland is some of the strangest, boldest, and most unforgettable dishes you'll ever come across. Some of them smell weird, others taste weird, and some do both at once. But for Icelanders, it's just normal. Let's start with the one that gets all the attention, hakkerl. That's fermented shark meat. Yes, you read that right. Rotten shark meat. This dish is famous for one reason. It is absolutely horrifying to smell and tough to eat unless you grew up with it. The story behind it is wild. Hundreds of years ago, Viking settlers in Iceland needed food during the harsh winters. One thing they had was Greenland shark, but the problem was it's poisonous when fresh. Eating it raw could kill you, but the Vikings were smart and stubborn. Instead of giving up, they came up with a method to make the meat safe. They buried it in the ground, let it rot for months, then dug it up and hung it out to dry for weeks more. By the time it was ready, it had a strong smell, one that's been described as a mix between ammonia, old socks, and something worse. The taste? Let's just say it's not for beginners. Even celebrity chef Gordon Ramsay once spit it out on TV. He couldn't handle it. Now, I've tried it once, and I can honestly say I survived barely. It smelled like death and tasted like regret, but somehow, it's a proud part of Iceland's food culture. Locals will tell you it builds character. I think it just ruins your taste buds, but hey, to each their own. But hakkerl isn't the only strange food on the menu. Iceland also eats puffin. Yes, those cute little seabirds with colorful beaks. They've been part of the local diet for centuries, especially in coastal areas. The meat is usually smoked and has a strong, gamey flavor. It's not everyone's favorite, but for some Icelanders, it's a treat. Another classic, sve, which is basically a boiled sheep's head. The entire head is split in half and served on a plate, tongue and all. You can see the teeth. You can see the eyeball. And yes, some people eat it all. It is not just for shock. It is a traditional dish that dates back to the old days, when no part of the animal was wasted. It was about survival, not style. These days, it's more of a festival or winter season meal, but it still exists and people still eat it proudly. On the sweeter side of things, there's something much more pleasant, lava bread, also called rugbrow. This one actually smells good. It's a dark rye bread that's baked slowly, sometimes even underground using geothermal heat. That's right, Icelanders bury the dough near a hot spring and let the earth do the cooking. The result is a soft, slightly sweet bread that goes perfectly with butter or fish. It is a reminder that Icelanders really know how to work with nature, even when it comes to food. And speaking of fish, you'll find plenty of that here. Fresh fish is a big part of everyday meals. Cod, haddock, salmon. It's caught locally and served in all sorts of ways. And you can't talk about Icelandic food without mentioning their love for hot dogs. Believe it or not, Iceland has some of the best hot dogs in the world. They're made with a mix of lamb, pork, and beef, and served with crispy onions and a special sweet mustard sauce. Locals love them. Tourists love them. Even people who hated the shark will go back for seconds on the hot dogs. So yes, Iceland's food can be weird. It can be bold. It can even be downright terrifying. But it's also a big part of what makes the country special. The harsh environment forced people to get creative with whatever they had. That meant fermenting, boiling, smoking, and even burying food until it became edible, or at least survivable. You don't have to love everything on the table here. Honestly, most visitors don't. But tasting these dishes, even just once, gives you a real look into how Icelanders lived, how they adapted, and how they've turned old survival food into cultural pride. And if you ever do try hackerel, just one warning. Hold your nose, chew fast, and chase it with a shot of Brennivin, Iceland's traditional black schnapps, which locals call Black Death. That's how they wash down the shark. Not because it tastes good, but because it's the only thing strong enough to erase the memory. Laws that will make you raise eyebrows. Iceland isn't just different when it comes to nature, food, or people. Its laws are also in a league of their own. Some of the rules here are so unusual, they'll make you stop and wonder, wait, is that real? And yes, it is. Let us start with one of the weirdest facts for most visitors. There are no McDonald's restaurants in Iceland. None. Not a single one. They all shut down in 2009 during the financial crisis. And instead of bringing the fast food giant back, Iceland decided they were better off without it. And honestly, they don't miss it. They've got their own local food. And people here take pride in eating things that are a bit more fresh and local, or at least not frozen and fried in the same way everywhere else is. Now let's talk about names. In most countries, you can name your child pretty much anything. Not in Iceland. Here, you actually need government approval before giving your baby a name. That's not a joke. There's something called the Icelandic Naming Committee, and they make sure that all names fit with Icelandic grammar and tradition. If the name doesn't follow the rules, it gets rejected. For example, you can name your baby Harriet or Duncan. Both have been denied in the past because they don't work well with the Icelandic language. It might sound strict, but the idea behind it is to protect the Icelandic culture and language. Since Iceland is so small, even small changes to the language matter a lot. But for foreigners or people who move here, it can feel strange. Imagine filling out paperwork for your child and getting a letter back saying, "Sorry, try a different name." Yep, that happens. And speaking of names, here, as another twist, Iceland doesn't use family surnames like Smith or Johnson. Instead, people use a system based on their parents' first name. So if a man named Eric has a son named John, the child's last name will be Eriksson, which means son of Eric. If he has a daughter, her last name would be Eriksdottir, meaning daughter of Eric. That means brothers and sisters can have different last names. And you won't find many people in Iceland with the same surname unless they share the same father. It can be confusing for outsiders, but it's totally normal here. Here is another rule that might surprise you. You can legally own a pet lizard, snake, or turtle in Iceland. These animals are banned. Why? Mainly because of health and environmental concerns. Years ago, turtles brought in a salmonella outbreak, and reptiles aren't exactly native to Iceland's cold climate. So the government decided to keep things simple and just ban them altogether. If you love reptiles, Iceland might not be the place for you. Believe it or not, beer was actually illegal in Iceland until 1989. That's not a typo. For most of the 20th century, you couldn't legally buy beer here. Wine and spirits were allowed earlier, but beer was banned for decades. It all started as part of a larger alcohol ban in the early 1900s, but even when the rest of the ban was lifted, beer stayed on the ban list. Some thought it would encourage heavy drinking, while others believed beer was connected to foreign culture. But in 1989, the ban was finally lifted, and now Iceland even celebrates Beer Day every year on March 1st to mark the occasion. Since then, the beer scene in Iceland has grown fast, with local craft breweries popping up all over the country. Still, alcohol here is heavily taxed and very expensive, so most people drink in moderation. One more thing that stands out: Iceland's laws about gender and politics. Almost half of the country's parliament members are women. That's one of the highest rates in the world. It didn't happen by accident. Iceland has worked hard to give women equal rights, equal pay, and equal chances to lead. From politics to business, Iceland truly leads by example when it comes to gender equality. So yes, no McDonald's, no weird baby names, no snakes in your house, and no beer for most of the 1900s. These laws may seem strange at first, but they're part of what makes Iceland so unique. This is a country that isn't afraid to do things differently, and maybe, just maybe, that's what makes it work so well. The cleanest, greenest country? It's not often you find a country that runs almost entirely on clean energy, but Iceland does. While much of the world is still struggling to switch to green alternatives, Iceland is way ahead of the game. In fact, around 99% of Iceland's electricity comes from renewable energy. That is not a dream or a plan for the future. That is happening right now, every single day. So how do they do it? Well, the answer lies right beneath their feet. Iceland sits on top of a lot of volcanic activity. That might sound dangerous, and sometimes it is, but it also means the country has a huge supply of geothermal energy. In simple words, geothermal power means using the heat from deep inside the earth to make energy. Icelanders drill into the ground where the Earth's heat is strongest, and they use that hot water and steam to produce electricity and heat their homes. It's smart, it's cheap, and it doesn't pollute the air. It also means you can take a hot shower, warm your house, or even cook bread underground, all thanks to the natural power of the Earth. Of course, there's one small downside. The hot water in Iceland smells a bit like rotten eggs. That's because of sulfur, which comes from the volcanic minerals in the water. But after a few days, you honestly stop noticing it, and once you realize how clean and sustainable it is, that little smell doesn't seem like such a big deal. Besides geothermal power, Iceland also gets a big part of its energy from hydropower using rivers and waterfalls to generate electricity. Since the country has so many rivers flowing down from glaciers and mountains, it's a perfect setup. It's quiet, reliable, and doesn't harm the environment. But Iceland doesn't stop at energy. The whole country has a clean vibe. The air feels fresh. The water from the tap is probably purer than most bottled water. And even the cities feel calm and unpolluted. Reykjavík, the capital, is full of bikes, electric cars, and colorful buildings, but it's also clean and peaceful. There's no smoke filling the sky, no dirty sidewalks, and almost no traffic. And then there's the Blue Lagoon, one of the most famous places in Iceland. It looks like something from a dream. The water is bright blue, surrounded by black lava rocks and steam rising into the sky. But here is something most people don't know. It is not a natural hot spring. The Blue Lagoon is actually man-made. It was formed from the runoff of a nearby geothermal power plant, but over time, the mineral-rich water started attracting attention. People began bathing in it, and soon enough, it became a world-famous spa. Now, it's a place where tourists and locals go to relax, rub white silica mud on their faces, and soak in warm water while snow falls around them. It's a perfect example of how Iceland mixes nature and modern technology. They've taken something industrial and turned it into a peaceful, healing experience. That's kind of the Icelandic way, using what they have, respecting the land, and making it work for everyone. And while the world debates how to handle climate change, Iceland is already living the solution. Their clean energy system has been in place for decades. They've shown that it's possible to have power without pollution, to stay warm without burning fossil fuels, and to live with nature. Not against it, but even with all this progress, Iceland doesn't act like it's better than anyone. The people are proud, but they're also realistic. They know they have advantages, like natural heat and water, that not every country has. Still, they prove that with smart choices and long-term thinking. A clean and green lifestyle isn't just possible, it's practical. So when you visit Iceland, you're not just seeing beautiful sights, you're walking through a country that's quietly leading the way. A place where the earth itself provides heat, light, and comfort. A country where energy doesn't come with guilt, and nature is treated with care, not as a resource to burn, but as something to respect. It's a land of contrasts, fire and ice, old traditions and high-tech solutions, cold winds and hot water. And in between all of that, Iceland has built one of the cleanest, greenest, and most balanced societies in the world. National quirks that will blow your mind if you thought Iceland was already strange. Just wait, it gets even better. This tiny island is packed with traditions, habits, and beliefs that will make you blink twice. Some are heartwarming, some are a little spooky, and some will just leave you asking, wait, is this real? Let's start with this fun fact. Iceland has more books than people. Literally, with a population of just under 400,000, you'd think they might not have enough readers to support many bookstores. But no, Icelanders are obsessed with books. They read them, write them, gift them, and even publish them in huge numbers. In fact, Iceland has one of the highest rates of authors per capita in the world. Almost everyone knows someone who's written a book, and like we mentioned earlier, during Christmas time, there is the famous tradition of Jólabókaflóð, the Christmas book flood, when people give each other books on Christmas Eve and then spend the night reading. While some countries rush out for gadgets and video games, Iceland stays home, puts on cozy socks, and reads. That's not weird, that's actually kind of beautiful. Now here's something more surprising. Iceland has no army. That's right, no military force at all. No soldiers, no tanks, no fighter jets. They don't even have a defense ministry. Iceland is one of the very few countries in the world with no standing army. Instead, they rely on international agreements and cooperation, mainly with NATO. But the fact that they've survived all this time peacefully without a military shows just how calm and secure this country really is. Speaking of peace, let's talk about the police. Icelandic police officers are some of the most relaxed in the world. In fact, most of them don't even carry guns. The country's crime rate is so low that they don't feel the need to be heavily armed. And get this, the police department in Reykjavík has an Instagram account where officers post selfies. Yes, real selfies. Sometimes with dogs, sometimes helping people, and often just smiling around town. Imagine that. Police officers taking selfies instead of chasing criminals. That says a lot about how peaceful life here really is. Now, let's get weird. Many Icelanders believe in elves. Yes, real elves, also known as hidden people. These aren't the tiny fairies from cartoons. In Icelandic folklore, they're invisible beings that live in rocks, hills, and natural landscapes. and their presence is taken seriously by a surprising number of locals. You'll find stories of construction projects being delayed or even rerouted because someone believed it would disturb the elves' home. In one real case, a road was diverted around a rock because people believed elves lived there and didn't want to upset them. It's easy to laugh at first, but when you spend time in Iceland, surrounded by strange landscapes, lava fields, and misty hills, you start to understand why the imagination runs wild. There's something about this place that makes folklore feel possible. And Icelanders, even the ones who say they don't really believe, still often prefer not to take chances when it comes to the hidden folk. And then there's Christmas. But forget everything you think you know about jolly red suits and sleigh bells. Iceland's Christmas traditions are a whole different story. Instead of just one Santa, Iceland has 13 Yule lads. These are mischievous troll-like brothers who come down from the mountains one by one, starting 13 days before Christmas. Each one has a unique personality and a very specific way of causing trouble. For example, there's Door Slammer, who slams doors loudly at night; Spoon Licker, who steals your spoons; Sausage Swiper, who, yes, steals your sausages; and Window Peeper, who creeps around and peeks into windows. It's creepy, it's funny, and it's very Icelandic. Kids leave out shoes by the window each night, and if they've been good, they get a little gift. If not, they get a rotten potato dot, no joke. And just when you think it can't get darker, there's Gryla, the terrifying troll mother of the Yule lads, who supposedly comes down and eats naughty children. And don't forget her giant black cat, the Christmas cat, that eats kids who don't get new clothes for Christmas. Yes, you heard that right. Icelandic Christmas sounds more like a spooky fairy tale than a cozy holiday. But for Icelanders, it's just part of the fun. So, to recap, a country with no army, book-obsessed people, police who take selfies, elves that might stop your highway project, and Christmas trolls who steal sausages. It all sounds a little crazy, but it's what makes Iceland such a special, surprising place. In most countries, these things would feel out of place. But here in Iceland, they somehow all fit together, like puzzle pieces that only make sense once you see the whole picture. And that picture? It's weird, it's magical, and it'll stay with you forever. Festivals, nightlife, and what locals really do if you think Iceland is all quiet villages and peaceful nature. Think again. When the sun goes down, or sometimes doesn't go down at all, Icelanders know how to have a good time. Despite the cold, long winters, or maybe because of them, this country has one of the most surprising nightlife and music cultures in the world. Let's start with the music. For such a small country, Iceland produces a huge amount of creative talent. You've probably heard of Björk, the bold and unique singer whose music is known worldwide. Or maybe you've listened to Sigur Rós, whose dreamy, emotional songs feel like they were recorded in a magical cave under a glacier. These artists didn't just become famous, they shaped Iceland's music scene, and their success has inspired new generations of musicians, bands, and songwriters all across the country. Music here isn't just something to listen to. It's part of everyday life. Even in the smallest towns, you'll find someone who plays an instrument, sings, or records music at home. Reykjavík, the capital, is filled with tiny music bars, independent record stores, and live performances happening almost every weekend. One of the biggest events of the year is Iceland Airwaves, a music festival that happens in early winter. You'd think it would be too cold for a party, but not in Iceland. The whole city of Reykjavík comes alive with performances in bars, concert halls, cafes, and even laundromats. Local artists play alongside international acts, and the energy is wild. Everyone bundles up, heads out into the chilly night, and ends up dancing, singing, or discovering their new favorite band. But Icelandic fun isn't just about big events. It's also about what locals do in their free time. One of their favorite places to relax and socialize is the public swimming pool. But this isn't like a pool at a hotel. It has a full-on social experience. Almost every town has its own geothermal heated pool complex, complete with hot tubs, saunas, steam rooms, and cold plunges. People go there not just to swim, but to talk, unwind, and catch up with neighbors. You'll often see groups of friends chatting in hot water. Even when there's snow falling all around, it's cozy, healthy, and deeply Icelandic. Now, let's talk about nightlife because yes, Icelanders know how to party, but they do it a little differently. For starters, bars and clubs don't get busy until midnight or later. That's not an exaggeration. Most people don't even leave their house until 11:30 p.m. and the party doesn't hit full swing until after 1 a.m. But once it starts, it goes strong, sometimes until sunrise. Why so late? One reason is the price of alcohol. In Iceland, alcohol is expensive. A single beer at a bar can cost you as much as a full meal in other countries. So locals came up with a solution, runtur. It is an Icelandic word that basically means going out and drinking, but it usually starts at home. People gather at someone's house, drink, talk, listen to music, and only head to the bars once they're already warmed up, both socially and, well, you get the idea. Once out, the atmosphere is lively but still laid back. People dress casually. There's music everywhere, and even the bouncers are polite. It's a friendly scene. And because Reykjavík is small, you often bump into people you know, or at least recognize. It gives the whole night a kind of cozy, local vibe, even when the party is loud. What's great is that, even after a late night, Iceland stays clean and safe. There's very little violence or trouble, and people tend to look out for each other. It's not uncommon to see someone walking home alone at 4 a.m. without worry. That says a lot about the kind of place Iceland is. So whether you're soaking in a hot tub with snowflakes falling on your face, dancing in a tiny basement bar during a music festival, or walking home under a sunrise that never really set, Iceland knows how to enjoy life. Even in the cold, even in the dark, or maybe because of it. The harsh but healing weather, if there's one thing that defines life in Iceland, besides volcanoes, hot springs, and elves, it's the weather. And let's just say, it keeps you on your toes. The saying, if you don't like the weather, just wait 5 minutes isn't a joke here. It's real. You could be standing in bright sunshine one moment and running from sideways rain the next. The wind can be wild. The skies change constantly, and no two days feel quite the same. That's just part of life on this island in the North Atlantic. Now, let's talk about winter, because winters in Iceland are long, dark, and intense. In some places, the sun barely rises at all for several weeks during the deep winter months. Daylight can last only 3 or 4 hours. The rest of the time, it's twilight or full-on darkness. That might sound peaceful or depressing, and the truth is, it can be both. For some people, especially visitors, the lack of sunlight can feel heavy. It is not just about having short days. It is the feeling of being wrapped in darkness for weeks. It can affect your mood, your energy, even your sleep. That's why mental health is something Icelanders take seriously. But they've also learned how to cope and even thrive in the darkness. Community is a big part of it. People make a real effort to spend time together. Whether it's cozy evenings at home, visits to the hot pools, or gathering at cafes, Icelanders know the importance of connection. They also turn to creativity. Long winters have inspired tons of writers, painters, musicians, and filmmakers. The cold and dark might seem harsh, but it often leads to beautiful art. Another way people get through it? Hig-style living. It's all about creating warmth and comfort with candles, soft lighting, good food, and quiet time. Icelanders make their homes feel safe and cozy. It's like turning the cold world outside into a reason to enjoy life inside. And just when you think the darkness will never end, summer comes, and Iceland flips completely. In summer, the country is flooded with light. In fact, there are weeks when the sun doesn't really set at all. This is the famous midnight sun. You can go hiking at 2 a.m. and still see everything clearly. The sky glows orange and pink, and everything feels alive. It's almost like nature is making up for the months of darkness. People stay out late, festivals fill the calendar, and there's this buzzing energy all around. Locals take road trips, camp out in the wild, and soak up every minute of daylight while they can. You'll even find people doing things that seem impossible, like playing golf at midnight. Yes, that's a real thing. The change between seasons isn't just about light. It's emotional. In winter, people turn inward, quiet, reflective, calm. In summer, it's the opposite, open, bright, full of motion. Living in Iceland means learning to move with the seasons, to respect the rhythm of nature, and to listen to your body and mind. And that's the beauty of it. The weather here doesn't pretend to be easy. It's moody, dramatic, and sometimes exhausting. But it also teaches you something about patience, about resilience, and about appreciating the small things, like a cup of hot coffee in a snowstorm, or the first real sunlight after months of gloom. So yes, the weather in Iceland can be harsh, but it's also healing in its own strange way. It forces you to slow down, to feel things more deeply, and to realize that even the coldest, darkest nights eventually lead to light. What can we learn from Iceland? After everything you've heard so far, the strange food, the wild weather, the lava, the trolls, and the baby named Loss, it is easy to think Iceland is just a land of odd stories. And in some ways, it is. But underneath all the quirks, there's something much deeper. Iceland isn't just a weird little island in the North Atlantic. It is a country that quietly teaches the rest of the world something important: how to live well. Here's a country that's isolated, cold, and volcanic. It sits far from the hustle of global cities, with a population smaller than many neighborhoods. Yet despite all that, or maybe because of it, Iceland ranks consistently among the happiest countries in the world. So how is that possible? One big reason is trust. Icelanders trust each other. They trust their neighbors, their police, their teachers, and even their government. Corruption here is very low. People don't feel like they're being cheated or left behind. When someone drops a wallet, it gets returned. When something goes wrong, the community comes together. And when people feel safe and supported, they naturally feel happier. It also helps that community life is strong, even in modern times. Iceland has kept its close-knit spirit. People know their neighbors. They chat in hot pools, gather for small-town festivals, and help each other through long winters. The culture encourages openness and equality, not status or competition. No one's really trying to flex here. You are not judged by your job title or the car you drive, but by how you treat others. And while many countries are just starting to talk seriously about saving the planet, Iceland has already made sustainability a normal part of life. Renewable energy, that's been their reality for decades. Clean air and water, it's expected. People recycle, walk, bike, use geothermal heat, and respect nature, not because it's trendy, but because it's part of the mindset. So what does this mean for the rest of us? We live in a world that's always moving, always connected, always pushing us to do more, earn more, buy more. But Iceland takes the opposite approach. It shows us that slowing down, staying grounded, and living simply can actually lead to more peace, not less. Just think for a second. What would your life look like if you lived with more simplicity? What if your days weren't packed, your phone wasn't buzzing nonstop, and your weekends weren't about shopping or scrolling, but about soaking in warm water or reading a book by the fire? What would your world feel like if it ran on equality, where your gender, background, or bank balance didn't limit your opportunities, and where people helped you up instead of pushing you down? And what if, just maybe, you had a little more cold water courage in your life? The kind of courage that lets you walk into the unknown, face the storm, take a freezing dip, or start something new, even when it's uncomfortable. Icelanders know how to do that. And that's something worth copying. Because here's the truth. Happiness isn't about having the perfect weather, the biggest city, or the fanciest lifestyle. Iceland proves that you can live on a rock surrounded by glaciers, with darkness half the year, and still find joy, balance, and meaning. It's not a fairy tale. It's not magic. It's mindset. And while you might not be able to move to Iceland tomorrow, you can borrow pieces of it. Maybe it's spending more time in nature. Maybe it's letting go of perfection. Or maybe it's just checking in on your neighbors a little more often. Small things, but they add up. In the end, Iceland isn't just interesting because it's different. It's inspiring because it's working. People there live longer, happier, and more connected lives, and they're doing it without massive wealth, huge cities, or tropical weather. So maybe the real question isn't why is Iceland so strange? Maybe it's why aren't more places? Trying to be like Iceland, you've just seen a country where people believe in elves, eat rotten shark, warm their homes with volcanoes, and live in nearly complete darkness for months at a time, and still somehow rank among the happiest people on Earth. And now, maybe you're wondering, how does that even work? How do they stay sane, joyful, creative, even through all that isolation and cold? How do they manage to build a life that feels so strange, but so good? Well, here's the twist. Maybe that's exactly why they're happy. Because they stopped chasing what makes sense to everyone else and started choosing what makes sense for them. Iceland is a reminder that life doesn't have to be huge, loud, crowded, or filled with noise to be meaningful. It just needs to be real, honest, connected, balanced. It shows us that you don't need endless sunshine or giant cities to live a beautiful life. You just need to choose it, even if that life includes fermented shark or fear of upsetting elf rocks. And now I want to ask you something that might stick in your head. What is stopping you from building a life that is weird and wonderful? Not in Iceland, but right where you are? What's stopping you from simplifying? From creating routines that feel like rituals? From turning off the noise, slowing down, spending more time in nature, reading more books, lighting more candles, or caring a little less about what everyone else is doing? You don't need to move across the world to make your life feel new. You don't need a passport to feel at peace. Sometimes, all it takes is a shift in mindset, and Iceland might have just handed you that shift. Because maybe Iceland isn't just a country. Maybe it's a mindset that says, be bold, be different, be peaceful, care more about people than profits. Bake your bread underground if you feel like it. Believe in things even if others don't. And don't be afraid to keep life a little weird, because that's where the magic is hiding. That's where happiness is hiding. You don't need to eat sheep's head or ban McDonald's to follow that mindset. But maybe you do need to stop following a life that doesn't feel like yours. Maybe you just need permission to do things differently. And if Iceland can give that to you, through snowstorms, trolls, and lava fields, then maybe you're already closer to that kind of life than you think. So the next time your routine feels dull, your screen feels too bright, or your days feel too rushed, ask yourself this: what would Iceland do? It might sound silly, but that question can change everything. Now before we end, here's one more thing to think about. If you thought Iceland was the strangest, most unique country on the planet, you're going to want to stick around for what is coming next, because there's another country, smaller, quieter, even more unusual, that just might make Iceland look, well, normal. We'll talk about that next time. But for now, take a deep breath, look around you, and ask, can I live with a little more wonder? Can I find my version of lava bread and midnight sun? Can I create a life that's more honest, more peaceful, more mine? Because if a nation with frozen roads, unpredictable weather, troll folklore, and glow-in-the-dark skies can do it, then maybe you can, too. Thanks for watching. Now go live a little differently.